Recording goes, and we are set.
Cool.
Okay, Kim, welcome to the hot seat tonight. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me.
Great. We're happy to have you. And I think you said it was 3:00 in the morning your time.
Yes, it is.
What time do you have to be up at work?
I'm currently a student, so I have a very easy day tomorrow.
Ah, good. That's why you could stay up late.
Today. So this is why Thursday's okay. But on a Wednesday, I don't generally make it. This is why occasionally you see me on a Sunday.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Wow.
And-
well, sorry, go ahead.
And of course, I can have a Sunday afternoon nap to prepare me for a bit of a disco nap before my late night.
A disco
Great.
nap. I like
I
that.
like that. I wish I had a disco nap.
I know, me too. I want one of those.
At least
Right.
I didn't have. I mean, I didn't take Red Bull today, so I think I'll be okay. I mean, I'd still be okay.
Good.
Well, Kim, you kind of know the format of the podcast. You've seen us several times before. So we always like to get to know you first. But tonight, we kind of picked a topic that I think you may know a little bit about. And that's usually why we try and pick those topics. And that is sort of this feeling of coming back to church after a divorce, because there's a lot of people who just need some time away. And that can be very difficult when you're in a situation where you're like, hey, people don't understand me in the ward. People don't understand what I'm going through, or people are judging me. You feel that kind of coming down the pike, like, oh man, they really screwed up their marriage. And so I'm going to kind of ostracize that person. It can make it very difficult. I think for those people in the ward who have never been divorced, I think sometimes it's very hard for them to relate. And I thought it was very telling too, that in this last general conference, and I had heard this statistic a couple weeks before from one of my stake presidency members, that there are now more people that are single in the church than are married, which I find interesting. And I'm assuming they mean single adults. I'm not sure that youth count, right? Because obviously they're
adults.
single. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, that will be our topic for tonight, but we'll get into that after we get to know you a little bit. That's always kind of the meat and potatoes of this is the topic, but for sure the icing on the cake is the guest that we have in the hot seat. So Kim, you're in England, as your accent clearly makes it known. So what part of England are you in?
I am currently just north of London. So it's technically the southeast of England. Do you need the closed captions up so people can understand the translation?
Yes. Gosh, that accent's so terrible. I think Celeste actually has a hard time with accents, don't you?
Not the English accents, but majority of every other accent, absolutely. I am not one that can understand them.
Now, I actually spent a year in the States when I did my first degree. I did my second year in Rhode Island on exchange. And the amount of times I would go into a shop and ask for something and just be stared at, because it was like, oh, you've got such a cute accent. Now, what did you ask for? And it's like,
That's funny because Celeste is in the South. She's down in Texas. Some people might not consider it the South, but Texas is definitely the South.
It is.
And they have accents pretty thick, but, well, some people. And somehow you get by.
however, it did also help me get away with a speeding ticket, not get a speeding ticket from State Trooper. And my friend who I was driving was like, how did you manage that? I was just like, cute.
I have a cool accent. That's right.
So if we pull out the fake accents, we have a chance of getting off. Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Just
And an international
before you
driver's
go.
license, I think, helped as well.
That's awesome. So my family's all from Texas, and my mom had a very thick accent, and people would call up and, when we're in high school or something, hey, is so-and-so there or whatever. And hang on just a second. There we go. Did you turn that back on?
I did.
Okay. So anyways, people would call up asking, and my mom would answer the phone, and she was born and raised in Texas, had a very, very thick accent. And they could not understand what she was saying. They're like, where in the heck is your mom from? I couldn't understand a word she said. Like, come on, guys. It's not like she's from Mars or something. She had a Texas accent, Texas drawl. So anyways,
We have the
I
same with our
understand.
northern accents and north of the border as well. So
Ah. So can you tell the different British dialects? I mean, this is completely off topic here, but I'm just fascinated by this just really quickly because we were, Celeste and I have been going through Sherlock, the British series, and it's pretty good. But sometimes they'll have some guy that they'll bring in, and it almost sounds like a dirty kind of British accent. You know, I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of just like it's a little bit more slangy, I guess.
we have lots of regional accents, and you can tell in very particular areas where people come from. So Yorkshire, Birmingham, further up north, Lancashire. And if you mix up a Lancashire and a Yorkshireman from their accent, oh, that's not a good thing to do.
That's not good, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, my relatives are from Lancashire, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's where I'm from.
So very proud history they have, and very specific about their accents. And also lots of little words like what you call a bacon sandwich. Depends on where you live, and just little local things. So
Awesome. So tell us a little bit about you. You're a student now again, but obviously you did a study abroad in Rhode Island. I mean, we just went over that. So what are you studying? What level of education are you working on? What's your goal now? Where are we going here?
I'm currently studying physiotherapy. So I'm back to bachelor's study. I already have a bachelor's in molecular biology and a master's degree in equine behavior, performance and training. As you do.
Were you going to be like a horse trainer or something?
I've done that. And I was actually a lecturer at a university for equine studies and equine therapies. And sorry, I'm reading the comments and I need to not because people try to make me laugh. And so, but I had an incident where I lost my voice completely for 4 months.
Oh.
Could not make a sound. And obviously as a lecturer, not great. So therefore, I kind of had to rethink my life. I was already going through I'd been a school teacher for 17 years. I'd worked with horses before that and in between. And as an instructor, as a groom internationally, I actually left teaching at one point and went and worked for our Olympic dressage rider right before London 2012, and have my own horse and compete, etc., etc. But that's my love, but it doesn't make enough of a living to really have that impact that I can stay and do that. So if somebody was to come along and hand me a load of money and say, go do what you want, that's what I'd be doing. But in the real world, I kind of rethought about the teaching side, and because that's a bit soul destroying. And in the UK, most teachers only last 5 years. Oh. So having been head of department and trained teachers for years, I kind of got to the end of that, took my master's, went and became a lecturer, and then thought, okay, I'll go do something else. And I was like, I'll go retrain. And what a perfect time to go retrain, because education over the pandemic has been ridiculous.
Yeah.
So very grateful I'm in a situation where I can carry on.
So now you can't ride the coattails off of your prior education to kind of bump up to like a master's level in physical therapy? There's no transition that goes across?
I could have done, but the course that I'm doing, I get another student loan for, so I could afford to do it. Whereas if I did another master's, I'd have to pay for another master's, and it's only 1 year shorter. So I wanted that extra year because there's so much to learn. So basically you've got to learn every bone, tendon, ligament, muscle of the body, how all the biomechanics works. And then there's a respiratory side, then there's the neurone side and the neurological side as well. And you've got to do 1,000 hours of clinical practice before you can become registered. So to do that in 2 years, I was like, for once, I'm not going to fast track, because I've fast tracked everything else academically, and I just want to do it in a reasonable time. And I'll be 50 by the time that I graduate and start work. So I've still got a good 20 years of work in me. So it's all good.
Physical therapy, though, I mean, if you're coaching somebody through, but if you're actually working on the manual manipulation, that can be a little hard on your body, especially as you get older.
Yeah, but I've worked very physical jobs as well with the horses. So in my 40s, I was still working internationally. So driving lorries across Europe, mucking out 10 horses a day, riding 4 or 5 at a time at a high competition level. So I'm pretty fit for my age.
You are very tough. You can do it, huh? Did you sneak in there that you were in the Olympics?
I worked for one of our dressage riders that was at the Olympics in the year running up to the Olympics. I ended up going to manage his yard for the year so that he could concentrate on just the qualification.
Oh, okay.
And it was through a friend of a friend. Whilst we were at Olympia, one of the big horse shows, he was looking for somebody. She was trying to persuade me that I'd like to do this. And I thought, oh, I'll go for it because he's never going to offer me the job, and offered me the job. And it was a good year.
Yeah, nice.
Oh.
And when these opportunities come, you've just got to do it.
Yeah, gotta take
Wow.
hold of those.
Now, throughout all of this, I mean, you've kind of gone through and you were married for a while. You're now divorced. How long have you been divorced?
I have been divorced for, oh, crikey, it's a long time. I actually had to go and look it up for my bio. It's been well over 12, 13 years, something like that.
Okay. So you got divorced in your 30s then?
Yes. And that was the second time I got divorced. So the first time I got divorced, I had a 2-year-old son, and I was 23. So I then got married about 5 years later, and then divorced about 4 years after that. So
Any kids from that marriage?
no.
Okay.
So just the one son, who's now 28 and in the Navy and supporting himself. And so
Wow, every mother's dream. All of their
Dream.
kids out of the house and out of their basement.
out
Nice.
of the house, taking me to dinner.
Oh, that's nice. Paying
Great
for
age.
dinner.
That's sweet.
Maybe we should have him come have a talk with Skippy about like kind of getting out of your basement.
For real.
And
So-
it's so sweet because when he went to university, obviously I'd sent him food packages, and now he sends them to me. So the other day I had packages arrive here from Amazon, and I'm like, I haven't ordered anything. I need to actually been through my watch list. Bless him.
Ah,
That's
So
so
just-
sweet.
Went onto my little watch list and ordered me a load of stuff, and then ordered me a food parcel. So
well, that's nice of him.
bless him.
Now, was he at some point during all of this, you kind of joined the church? Was that with him when he was younger, or was this kind of a little bit further down the road, or where?
I
did that
joined
come
the
into play?
church when I was about 15.
Oh, okay.
Ah, okay.
So yes, I'm the only member in my family. I've been the weirdo in my family that's always believed in God. I come from a very non-religious family, total unbelieving. But even as a small child, I would go with friends to the little Baptist church at the end of our road. On a Sunday, I went to the Salvation Army. I went to lots of different churches growing up, just looking for something, and it wasn't ever quite right. And one day the missionaries came and knocked on our door, and my mum was like, no, we don't do that. Oh, hold on. My daughter is kind of religious and goes to stuff, so maybe she'll be interested. Come back when she's here. And thank goodness she did, because it was just, I read the Book of Mormon and it just was like, yeah, this is it. This is what I've been looking for.
That is great that your mom supported you, though. You know what I'm saying? Like, she could have just turned him away and not mentioned you. So that's kind of cool.
She just I think it was just the spirit working in that moment where she just kind of, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
So was
that's
it
awesome.
instant for you to join the church? Like, I know for others, it will take the entire, missionary session and maybe another month or two. How soon did you join the church when the missionaries met with you?
I think it was a few months. I can't really recall, to be honest. I was 15. Time just kind of goes when you're 15, doesn't it? So
That's true.
I remember having all the discussions and then a bit more. And my sisters, my mum having the discussions, but then just kind of not really getting it. So yeah.
Led by the Spirit, for sure.
That's awesome.
Now in England, as I understand, here in America, we're kind of battling this sort of trend of everybody turning woke, and religion is kind of becoming a hiss and a byword. But from what I understand, over in England, it may be even worse, right? Like religion is pretty frowned upon over there. Am I correct?
Religion isn't openly talked about often. And when it is, it's usually to condemn the Muslims, or to condemn those born again Christians that are down in the streets. And if you have somebody in the street proselyting, and you do get looked at a bit odd. I am in the minority, being just religious, and that's one of the things I really appreciated when I came to the States, was that people talked about their faith, and people talk openly about their faith, and I think that's much less so here where I am.
What happens
isn't that sad? Because it seems like the church, like one of the first missions, wasn't it over to England? So I mean, that's where I know a lot of my family came from, and it seemed like the gospel kind of has deep roots over there. So that's kind of sad.
It really does. And I remember a story of one of the prophets before Ezra Taft Benson, I can't remember which one it was, asked the Tabernacle Choir to stand if their families had British roots, and a very large percentage of them did. So lots of the early saints came from Europe.
Yep.
Yes, possibly the Kimball. I can't remember, but so lots of roots, and then they stopped us going in the mid 60s. So until the mid 60s, saints were asked to go off to Utah.
Wow. Okay.
So now, if you were there today, and let's say you're talking openly in a restaurant or something, would people look at you weird, like, okay, total religious kook? Is it that bad? Is it to that level?
It is to the level where my friends, the people at university, there are some of us that are a bit older, some of us that are a bit younger. And I was talking with one of the guys who's Muslim about Ramadan, and they accept him as a Muslim. But when I kind of said, oh yes, well, in my religion, we fast once a month instead of for a whole month, I couldn't imagine trying to do that. And people just were like, you're religious, really? And then you try to explain things like no sex before marriage, and it's just, that blows their mind. Completely blows their mind. That's the thing that and they just see it's restrictive, and why would you do that to yourself?
Follow blindly. All of those crazy things. Yeah.
So it's just, but and so I don't think we're as open about talking about it, and you're just a bit more particular who you talk to.
So then how is the church over there then, especially on a singles level where we're all at? What does the church look like? I mean, I couldn't imagine you have a ton of single activities or mid-single activities, or
currently nothing is going on. We have been shut down for COVID. We've literally opened on Monday, and this area went into lockdown in November. We were given 4 days over Christmas and then back to complete lockdown. So that includes shops, schools were shut down again. Everything was completely shut down for the second wave, and schools went back 3 weeks ago, and shops opened on Monday, including hairdressers, so I could go finally not have lockdown locks. So I was very grateful for that. So if you were classed as unessential, you couldn't open until Monday. So nothing's gone on. We can't organise anything. You're only allowed out in public in groups of 6 at the moment. So trying to organise anything.
There's a curfew at 6 o'clock?
No, you're allowed groups to meet.
Oh, groups in 6, excuse me. Okay.
Oh, gotcha.
But only outside. Currently only outside.
And that's the current right now? Or was that before things opened up?
That's now. That is what we opened up to. We weren't allowed to meet in groups until this week.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
I mean, I know Texas kind of thinks it's its own country and does its own thing, but that's one of the perks. Just don't go along with the rest of everybody.
However, having seen the impact on our health system, and knowing we've had students in ICU. Physio departments have been completely closed because they've been taken to ICU. And ICU has been totally overwhelmed. And locally, our hospitals have been overwhelmed. I can totally understand why they had to do it.
It's a tough call. For sure.
That's an interesting thing, because I hear that as the excuse all the time of, we have to do this, and we're totally going to get shut down on YouTube if we say
Oh,
this. So
yeah.
maybe we should should not, but
The
YouTube
virus
likes to,
that can't be named.
Oh, okay.
yeah, they like to take us down if there's anything that they don't like concerning that. So, and that basically means everything. So you got, kind of a bunch of woke people that sit around and look for excuses to take your videos down. Anyways, so it's interesting that you guys are still locked down. It's kind of, that's got to be difficult.
Yeah, it is.
That kind of isolation is.
However, I'm going to say that, and I'm more involved in single adults this last year since lockdown than I have in years. I started going back out to single adult things about 6 months before, or maybe a bit more than that, about 8 months before lockdown started. The last single adult activity I went to, I drove for 2.5 hours. There were 8 of us there. And
is that a good showing? I don't know. There's like this pause, like, is that great? Or...
And apparently that's pretty normal. Pretty normal.
Okay.
Really?
We have 3 or 4 big conventions throughout the year in the whole country, and apparently they're really well attended. I've been to a couple of conventions about a year after I divorced and had a few interesting experiences, so didn't go back to any, including being stalked.
Oh my gosh. Well, you got to tell us about that.
Right.
You can't bring it up and then not tell us.
So met a very nice guy, wasn't particularly interested, but I'm a friendly girl and I'll talk to anybody, basically. So just being polite. We'd chatted a bit. I'd gone and done some activities, chatted a bit more. He asked me for my number and I said, I'm very sorry. I see you as a friend, but I don't really see this going anywhere. So declined, drove home, didn't think anything else of it. And the next thing I know, there's a bunch of flowers being delivered to my work.
Oh,
work?
A huge bunch of flowers to my work. So I'm working in a secondary school and I'm called down to reception for a big bunch of flowers. And I'm like, I've got no idea who this is from. Read the card and was just like, crikey, how did he find out where I worked? He knew I was a teacher. He knew I was from Portsmouth. That was it. And I was just like, and I haven't got the name that you can go Google and easily find, because if you go Google Kim Young, you get loads of Koreans, loads of Chinese. I'm really easy to hide. So it wasn't that he could easily go and do that. So I was a little bit miffed, ignored it, didn't think too much of it until Valentine's Day. There was a rose and a card left at the chapel for me. Gosh. At which I was just a little bit like, this is a bit spooky freaky. Now.
Yeah.
Went spoke to my bishop and said, look, I'm quite upset by this. Can you figure this out? I just know the guy's name and I know the area that he lives in. And then didn't think anything else of it. And then there was another occasion and there was a gift for me and another card. And I just was like, what's going on? Left at the chapel again. And I'm just like, this is weird. So please just have words.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
And then it stopped. I think he got raised to the state presidency because he was a high councilman. So
oh my gosh, he was probably getting into like your records or something.
That was
oh man.
Oh my god.
Wow.
So yes, I attract the crazies right yeah.
Well, at first it's probably like, ooh, flattering flowers at work, and then all of a sudden like a bit much now. But the fact that he's in he's a councilman, that's getting your information probably that way. I don't want to assume, but if he knows,
who knows? It could just be we had friends in my ward who knew where I worked, blah blah blah. So
yeah,
that's
the church
true.
is a very small place.
Oh,
And if you
I'm
know
glad it stopped,
everybody,
because that's very uncomfortable, a recurrence.
hindsight, very funny. However, at the time,
In the middle, not so much.
While it's happening.
while it's happening,
At least it was a good thing he was like a high councilman or something that you could like track down, not like, well, we have this guy, he's pretty much inactive. We don't know a whole lot about him. Then you're like, this is going to be a little more difficult here.
That's a little more
The
extra
president
creepy.
might not have much sway.
Yeah.
But
I would have the card, like the handwriting investigated.
Yes, analyzed. Get fingerprints off of it. See if he has a record.
Powder.
but the other thing is, you turn up at a convention, and the first one I turned up to and persuaded two friends to come with me. So we drove up to Wales from the south coast up to Wales, and we got there, and we were in our must have been mid-late 30s, and the average age was about 60.
Wow.
So we were like, okay. There's a small group of us that were younger, but mostly it was the older generation. So it's like, okay, so we need to do something about this. But
how old were you? How old were you at that time?
I was like mid-30s. So
okay. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I've been informed that I've just been going to the wrong conventions. And I've been told, when I moved to the ward I'm in now, I've been told by somebody that goes that when everything opens up, she's going to take me to the right things.
Oh, good. That's what you need. Someone to guide you to the right place.
Hey, a buddy system.
The creepy guy, was he like in his 60s when you were like in your 30s at the time still?
Late 50s, I think.
So he was quite a bit older, either way.
It's creepy, no matter his age, but yeah, that's extra creepy.
It doesn't matter. No, but coming back to my original point, is that actually Zoom has been amazing for single adults. And I now have a group where every night of the week, there's a bunch of us from the UK, all over the UK, and also a few American interlopers, some of whom are here tonight. And
yes.
I actually have to thank for telling me about the podcast.
Yeah.
And introduced me to the podcast. And so it's been great because I've really actually got to know people.
That's great.
We're already plotting for, as soon as lockdown's over, we are going to get together, we are going to do stuff.
That's
you guys
awesome.
are gonna meet up. That's awesome.
That was actually my question. Like, what are the efforts being done now that everyone's still on lockdown? And you mentioned that Zoom. I think last year October, that's kind of when I started exploring Facebook groups, because I felt like, okay, enough self-love. I need to interact with people.
Yeah.
That's the next step. And that's kind of how I found this group. And other like networking events. I felt like I was more ready at that time. But it's exhilarating. It's refreshing to actually talk to somebody, even though it's virtual, and you learn a bunch of stuff, along the way. So kudos.
Yeah. And it's been great. So we're going to kind of use this as a launching pad for real life things, I think. And I think as single adults, actually, we can't just wait for the program. We're old enough, ugly enough, and experienced enough to just get on with it. And if you want to do something, sort it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So is there a special someone amongst the group that you're going to be meeting up with?
No, unfortunately. There's a lot of girls. There's a lot of us girls.
Oh, girls, you got to get the guys in the mix.
Not yet, but it's coming.
Maybe.
David is he's volunteering, just so you know.
He volunteered as a tribute.
We just wait until you're actually allowed in the country, or I'm allowed out of the country. One of the two.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's interesting because I feel like this is kind of, maybe in Utah it's different. I don't know, possibly in Idaho. But outside of those kind of main church-centered areas, I feel like the singles programs are extremely lacking. And it's sort of like the church does something to do something, but it's like, for lack of a better term, pardon my usage of this, but it's half-assed, It's like, let's throw a program out there. We'll like make a little dance, yada, yada, whatever. And then kind of, And I've had this conversation with my stake president a lot. And he's like, yeah, we just really don't do much. If you guys don't make the effort, we don't do a whole lot. Like, dude, if more than half the church, more than half the adults are single,
Yeah.
why is this something that is not like more of a focus in the church?
My question is, though, of all those people who are single, how many are active? I've been called recently as our ward single adult rep because I made the mistake of asking who the rep was. So that I could, because I do a Thursday night gospel discussion group, and I wanted to invite our single adults to it so that we could and introduce them to some of the Zoom things that were going on. And I've been given this list, and obviously I'm new to the ward and was only there for 6 months before the pandemic, so haven't really met a lot of people. And so therefore I kind of sat down with a member of the bishopric to go through all the names, and there are 83 single adults on this list, and less than a dozen of them actually come out to church or are known to the church. So it's so of those numbers, I would want to dig down a bit deeper, but that's me being the scientist.
But it's like, why are they inactive, right? Like that's
exactly.
The
yeah.
Is one feeding into the other? Is this the cart leading the horse? You know, like if you have a steady program, because the church, I know from like leadership meetings I've had in the past, I think anybody that's been in these before, like we had a member of the 70 one time in one of our just stake leadership meetings, and he was talking to us about numbers, and he's like, okay, this is where people fall off. And he like had it like graphed out and everything, like, okay, like if they don't go on a mission, then a certain percentage falls off. If this happens, then a certain percentage falls off. Like the church knows that if, for example, somebody gets divorced, your chances of staying active are this. You know, they've got all that down pat. They are looking at the numbers all the time. So when they look at numbers and say, well, gosh, there's a lot of singles that are less active, like, well, yeah, but maybe when you look at that chart and you say, this is where they go inactive, if they had something, for example, right? I know that there is a big statistic from the church, because I've talked about this before with them, that from the young single adult ward, it transitioning into like mid singles or single adults, whatever the program might be, kind of that 30-year range, right? If you don't graduate or whatever they want to call it, then there is a big drop off. However, there is a less drop off if they have something to go into, right? If there is a program to accept them where they feel like, okay, I'm not in this program anymore, but I can transition over here. They have a home. If they don't have a home, then they're like, I guess I'm out, you know, I leave.
Whereas over here, we have more of an issue with that crossover from youth to single adults. We lose a huge percentage in that crossover, especially within the young women's. I've previously been young women's president in a couple of wards. I've moved quite a lot, so I've seen lots of different wards in this country, and that's where we have a real issue with our kind of youth, tail end of youth, that transition into Relief Society and priesthood.
Yeah.
And I don't know what you do about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously there needs to be something that is tailored towards this. And I feel like I said before, I feel like the church kind of throws a few things out there like, we kind of have some other things we're dealing with. We're worried more about the youth, or we're worried more about this. So, you know, here's a little bit of a budget, go have a little dance or whatever, and maybe do FHEs and bring cookies and pop or whatever, you know. It's like really, there are some leaders who get it, and some who are like a push.
I feel a change coming, and the couple of things that make me feel that there is a change is I was so excited that the single adults get the devotional in June and I know it was announced like months ago, but I've been looking forward to this, that there will be a devotional for us single adults, not the young marrieds, not the young single adults, and also that we got mentioned in conference, and we got mentioned twice in conference.
Yes.
True.
And I think it's significant that actually there's a recognition. But who is it that's going to lead these programs? It's us. We've just got to pull our finger out and get on with it.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
agree.
the question is, even if we were to come out and say, hey, I want to do this, will our leadership get behind it? A, will they support it? B, or will it just get shut down and we have to kind of do our own thing? C, I know a lot of people who, especially during COVID, they're like, gosh, I guess if you have a family, I don't know if it feels better to them or something, but when you're single, you can feel like you are on an island all by yourself. Like, I haven't really been to my ward or anything else in forever. I don't even know what's going on. I mean, for me personally, I don't know, my ministering brothers don't really do a whole lot. I mean, they check in if they have to or something. Like, I think they did at the beginning of COVID, but I didn't hear from them for a year. So I could have just completely dropped off the radar and people would have been like, oh, I wonder if that guy moved. Like, once people come back, that's because they have you on a roll somewhere. Absolutely.
And that can happen outside of COVID times as well, because who's going to check up that we turn up unless we're given a calling, unless we're given something to do? We're lucky in regards to over here because there are so few members. You get multiple callings usually. And it's usually the same 10, 15 people that go around all the major callings. But as soon as I walked into my new ward and said to the bishop, hi, this is me, I got an interview the next week just to introduce myself. Are you prepared to serve? Yes, I'll serve in any capacity next week, called.
Wow.
And that's normal.
That's cool.
When you nip into a new ward here, because we don't have huge numbers in wards and everybody is kind of grabbed to do as many different things as possible.
My experience when I got divorced, there was a point in the past few years where I stopped searching for like my place in church, because I found that it's awkward. It's awkward for the Relief Society to ask how you're doing, and they can't relate to your pain. Some can, some can't. When I talked to my bishop, I was asking him certain questions relating to the divorce itself and what I'm gonna do. So what he did was offered me a calling, and I'm like, that's not what I need right now. I just want to be a member of the church. And so what he said kind of made me realize that maybe, I don't want to generalize it, but there's a certain level that they really don't know what to do with us, divorcees or single people, never married yet, that my bishop referred me to. You have to interact to the Relief Society sisters who are also divorced and single. And at that time, I wasn't comfortable opening up to anybody as far as my experience, because there's a lot of, it was new. And so I didn't know what to do with myself. And so I stick around. I accepted the calling that made me feel a bit more welcome, in the ward. But it was still a challenge because they put me in primary. And so it was kind of hard to not have my son every other weekend. And I tried to get up and get ready for church when I'm going by myself. And so that has been the challenge. And good thing my at that time, it's like my visiting teachers. They were very caring. But it still feels a little bit different. It's like I didn't fit the mold anymore. So I didn't know what mold I'm gonna be fitting in moving forward.
I can relate to that, but I kind of got to the point now where I think actually that was me projecting that rather than the people in the ward. At the time, I felt quite judged at the time, but I think that was my own guilt because I'd walked away from a temple marriage. And there were valid reasons for that. And I've had all of that. I've dealt with that now. But at the time, I just didn't know what to do with myself.
Right.
Yeah.
I just did not know how to cope with this, with my own actions and the guilt that I carried for a long time after that. And I stayed in the church for a couple of years, but at the same point, and I was active and I was young women's president and I had a small child, and it was just, but it really did affect my confidence and my belief in myself. And I never felt like I was good enough.
Right.
And that was the thing. But I've come to understand eventually, and this is a good 10, 12 years later, that actually I just didn't understand the atonement.
Yeah.
And so it was down to me not understanding and projecting my insecurities and projecting my guilt and not taking it to the right place and then leaving it. So yes, I was on my knees. Yes, I was praying, but I didn't know how to leave it there. And I didn't know how to value myself. So a lot of therapy later and a lot of work later, I finally kind of getting there.
Right. And it took me some time as well. But I like what you said, that when you're experiencing that, you're not in the space to realize that I'm gonna get better pretty soon. All you could think of is that I'm in this predicament right now and I can't do anything about it other than isolate myself or just keep pushing and see what comes out of it, you know?
Yeah. And I also was really depressed during that period.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't help you spiritually. And it takes a while to figure out that actually depression really affects you on a spiritual level that you don't always appreciate.
Yep.
Yep, I agree.
I agree.
So how long was it that you that you kind of stepped back? What kind of a time frame?
7 years.
7 years. Okay.
So, and all during that time, there was no point where I doubted the Book of Mormon. There was no point that I doubted Joseph Smith. There was no point that I doubted I had a Heavenly Father who loved me. There was no point that I doubted that I had a Savior. However, I doubted myself, and I doubted I was good enough, and I doubted that I could live up to my covenants, and I doubted that I could live up to my own expectations of what I should be as a member.
What kind of things was your ward doing during this time to try and keep connected to you or reach out to you consistently? Were they doing anything other than visiting teachers, sort of the standard thing?
My son was, how old? He was going through seminary. So he went to early morning seminary every morning. And this boy, bless him, when he started seminary, I told him that I would not wake him up at 5:30. I would be at the door at 5:30, ready to go to drive him to seminary. If he wasn't there, then I wouldn't take him. And every morning he got himself up, and every morning he took himself. And every Sunday he went, and every week he went to youth. So
sounds like he's got a bit of his mom's spirit in him.
Yeah, does.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I absolutely supported him, and I would take him to places, and everybody would be just treating me like I'm Kim, because my son had grown up in that ward. We moved away, come back, moved away, come back, moved away, come back. But the ward knew us, and we had people there that had been our home teachers for years. And I've been so blessed with the best home teachers ever, who were such a good example to my son from the age of 2, when I became a single parent the first time, all the way through, to show what a man of God is, to show what a good man is. Taking him, so we had brilliant home teachers that through primary would take him out for days out. Their primary teachers would take them for days out and doing things. And then as home teachers, they would teach him about the priesthood and take him home teaching, come and visit us on a weekly basis, just to check in, just to see how we were doing. They weren't there just to deliver the message. They were there to be our friends, to care.
You weren't just a check on the box, right? It wasn't like a check, I went to go see Kim. It was more like dedicated to your welfare.
They loved us. They loved us. They'd seen my son grow up in the church to being a teenager, and they knew us, and they knew where our heart was, and but they didn't know kind of how to cope with a depressed mum that just couldn't really cope with anything other than going to work and raising her son.
Yeah, I can imagine.
See, I kind of think of it along the lines of, obviously, you know, there's been a lot of people making comments about like, hey, they mentioned it in general conference, and there's some push to say, hey guys, by the way, if you're single, you can still serve in leadership positions. That's great and everything. However, unless the church kind of makes a push with local leaders, I think, are the ones who oftentimes just don't relate because they've never been in that situation. They may be great. They may really try and sympathize, but they don't empathize.
That's really alien to me. And I think it may just be a culture thing, because over here, I have, as a single woman with a 2-year-old, served as primary president, Young Women's President, Relief Society Presidency, on the stake. I have served across the board. And at one point, my son was an honorary young woman at the age of 5 and 6, because I couldn't leave him home and I had to be there at Mutual. And then when I was called the second time in a different ward, he then went to Young Men's 2 years early, because I was there on a youth night, and they just adopted him into youth 2 years early, because why would he have to go in with young women? He could just go be with the young men.
Yeah.
And so I do wonder if it's not a culture thing.
Yeah, that's not how it works here. I think there's just so many members per ward that it's like they don't really need you in a way. So you kind of get, you know, stuck in some random, if you have a calling, kind of stuck in some that just doesn't, you know, you don't have any way to engage with people and stuff. So
yeah, I know my bishop said basically point blank, you've got 2 young girls. Your time right now is to just focus on your girls and just kind of don't worry about any of this other stuff. Just take care of your girls. And I'm like, guys, I went to them and told them, look, if you don't want me to like fall away, put me to work.
yeah,
Like, give me stuff to do. Let me serve. Help me. And I'm not asking for a calling. I mean, the only calling I would ever buck for in the church would be magazine rep, because it's like super easy, right? Like low key. But I mean, give me something to serve. Like, give me service projects that people are going on. Help me do that. Nope. I mean, literally, my ward would not make contact with me unless I made contact. I could fall off the face of the earth. They'd never know. They wouldn't care. Other than for me right now, like, you know, I have some things to do in my calling. They're like, hey, how come that's not getting done? But that's my experience.
Yeah, that's the same for me. But where I have been in callings and where I have had to have counsellors and be there regularly, and currently gospel doctrine teacher, Sunday school teacher. So every other week, if I don't turn up, somebody will notice. But other than that, unless I contact somebody, then they wouldn't know me. But I think that's because I've only been in the ward a short time. My last ward were very welcoming and very much different, and I think it does change from where you've been, and how long you've been there and how well you know people. I've definitely been in wards where I haven't really fitted the mold of the ward, and I could barely remember the names of the people that I went to church with for 3 or 4 years. I couldn't remember them. That shows you how much impact we probably had on each other's lives.
yeah.
You know, sorry, go ahead, Christina. Go ahead.
No, so for me, there was a point in it, you know what, with me going through the entire divorce and trying to still be a member of the church and trying to figure out who I am. There was a point in my life where I just had to step back. And the topic for tonight is I just stepped back and really did a thorough check on what I was going through, because I felt like I was being pulled in so many directions. And I can totally relate with you, Kim, when it's like some wards are great, some like the other wards, it's okay. But I took a step back and I told myself, I'm gonna figure out what this healing means to me, because number one, I was going through the pain of the divorce. And then if there's so many things externally that I can't even focus on myself, that I actually need to heal first before reaching out, giving service to the members, to the ward, and accepting callings, um, I wouldn't probably be in this particular position that I am now in my life. And so I did my own church holiday. I'm like, I'm not gonna go to
A
church
church holiday.
because I felt like it was too much pressure to go to, go to sacrament and interact with people. And all I wanted to do, like if I wanted to go to church, was do sacrament and then leave. Maybe sometimes go to Relief Society or Sunday school at that time, when it's still, it's still happy, if I feel like it. And so I went through, like, as a human being, I'm not a super spiritual Christina at this point in my life. So I had to just scale back and accept the fact that I don't feel like going to church. And that's my truth right there. Doesn't mean that I'm a bad person, because there's a lot of judgment that I put upon myself, because I grew up in the church and I felt like I did everything I could. I was blaming the church, and then my best friend talked to me about it, and she was like, the church is there for everyone. There's a collective feeling, maybe in the space of, being single, being divorced, but there's still a part of you that you need to make a decision for yourself, however that looks like, whether you're going to church or whether you're not going to church. Remove the judgment. And it took a while. It was a process. It wasn't like an overnight experience that I'm like, I'm just going to stay in church until I figure out who I am. No, I had to scale back, at least for my experience. And that kept my sanity, because I just couldn't, in my experience, it's fitting the mold where I had the hardest time. And it worked. I like my church holidays. I like that, I define my own Sabbath, and and that might be it. So it's unboxing. It's out of the box. It's out of the box of me, Christina, being, growing up in the church, being Mormon, and I felt better. And so moving forward, I have the willingness to, okay, attend a Zoom sacrament meeting, or reach out to my Relief Society, just because I don't have that judgment or pressure. And that might not be resonating, or may resonate to, our audience tonight. But at some point, we just have to accept that we are human beings, number one, and we're not perfect. And it's okay not to be perfect. And life will throw things at you. And at the end of the day, the beauty is we can make decisions for ourselves. It's not the easiest, but we can. It's doable.
And I'm so glad that that worked for you. And I needed the opposite. I need to feel needed, and I work best when I serve. And when I'm the most lonely, it's when I usually put myself out to go and serve and go and get involved with things and people, and because I know I need to do it, because I would very easily withdraw. I would very easily just sit in my room all day, quite happily, snuggle in my bed. But that's not good for me spiritually, and that's not good for me mentally.
Right. And that's the beauty of it, is that we share this collective feeling, but in different experiences.
Absolutely.
That makes us the person that we are now.
And so I think we just have to be able to have those very open conversations with our leadership, and they've got to listen and be prepared to meet us where we are. So, for example, wherever it went and said, I need this, then actually somebody needs to listen. And
Right.
and I'm quite good at making sure that people listen. I'm a little bit feisty like that occasionally.
Yep.
Yeah.
I went to my new ward and I went, Bishop, I love primary, pop me in primary. So he puts me in gospel doctrine. And I just said, I need a calling. I need to get to know people. I need a calling. He's like, well, you can't hide in primary. Let's get you to know the members. And actually, the best thing that he did was exactly that, because it's the only thing that's kept going throughout the whole pandemic.
Yep.
It's so funny, because my experience is the opposite. The bishop asked me twice, offering me a calling. I'm like, no, maybe not this time. Yeah. Then eventually I accepted it. So
Try me again. Try me next month.
I'm just being honest here.
And we all need different things, and we all need different things at different times.
Exactly. Yep.
when they had 9/11 and that whole thing happened, afterwards they felt like there was sort of like a gap in what was being covered. And so they created the Department of Homeland Security, right? They're like, okay, there's a need here, we need to fill it. And I sort of feel like the church is sort of in that same position where they're like, okay, we understand that we now have more people that are single, that are adults than married. We have this gap. Why not create some sort of like general like board, or something on a higher level that can kind of coordinate better with the church from headquarters and say, guys, this is what we need to do. Let's create a comprehensive program here and get the church involved instead of just sort of leaving it at this quasi, like some places it works great, Utah, some places it really doesn't work. A lot of places people just are sort of like, well, we feel like it's more of a problem that we just kind of are too busy to deal with. Like, why not create something on a general level that is focused towards the largest segment of the adult population in the church to help find ways to reactivate those who are inactive, help those who are currently either transitioning from a marriage, going through a divorce, whatever, into singledom, or trying to transition out and get married? Why not have something on a grander scale that's more overseeing, that comes down from the top, that can handle the largest segment of adult population in the church?
I think that kind of goes against where the church has been going with everything becoming more home-based. But I think there needs to be some way of us communicating with each other what's going on. I think that's our biggest issue in this country, especially, is how do you find out what's going on? Unless you're in the know or you know somebody that's in the know, you just never find out about these things. We have 4 conventions a year, which are official conventions, but other things that kind of go on that people organize. But how do people find out about it? How do we promote these things? And I think that would be very beneficial, because I'm very happy to organize something. I tried to organize something last Christmas for the guys in our Facebook group, but obviously it couldn't happen because of COVID. And people were really like, yes, up for it, let's go do something. And I'm like, right, I'll do something because I can do that. However, it's then how do we get the next level to invite those people that aren't directly involved with me or my small group of friends?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is, again, we can start grassroots level, but at some point I feel like the higher up it goes, the easier it is to fizzle out. Stake presidency is like, okay, well, they're doing something, they put together a dance, they're all right, whatever, and they just sort of ignore it. Okay, now let's talk about like the young men, the young women, the stake presidency or stake whatever. They've got
We
100
don't
different
even get to the
auxiliaries.
stake level over here.
Wow.
Wow.
I don't think I don't know. Like, I'm new to the single scene, like pre-COVID. I don't know what was going on pre-COVID. Like, all I know is that during COVID, there's like nothing going on unless you're online. But it seems like, from what I understand, there really wasn't a ton going on even before COVID.
No.
And I don't know, like, I think Everett's made a good point. Like, over 50% of the population of the adults in our church are single. And
Absolutely.
Brian in the chat just pointed out, he's single. So to like study and worship at home with his family would be him chilling in his house, worshiping alone. And so, if you have kids, maybe that's a little more. I've got my kids here, so we can do home church and it works. But if you're single and you don't have kids, or you don't have your kids that week, there has to be something.
I feel it, and that's why I started on a Thursday night the gospel discussion group, and that's why Zoom has been life-saving for me and got me so much more involved in a group of single adults that I just wouldn't otherwise be involved with.
So I was in Utah when I was still in Utah when I got divorced, and I remember one Sunday wishing that there was a Sunday school class just geared towards all those divorcees, single, were like in that group, but there wasn't. I didn't even know that there's a divorce care class until like, recently. And nobody Nobody in my ward told me about it. But I think, making efforts, I think in a ward level, I would love to see or have a class if they have like what do you call that, self-reliant class or the 12 step. I wish that we would have such class, and I know it's different in every country because I grew up in the Philippines. There's no such thing as divorce in the Philippines, and for the most part, culturally, separating is frowned upon. It's not, it's very taboo still. There's annulment, but totally different, So I think in a general sense, it will have to be catered as far as like what classes are or what efforts are going to be done depending on which country, because the church still, I mean, not still, the church follows the law of the land.
Yeah.
And so there may be limitations, but I would love to see just a class where I can sit every Sunday with co-divorcees and single people that we can all relate to each other instead of like, I'm in a relief society and I would raise my hand and I would tell them I'm divorced, and I get the looks of, oh, poor you.
So sorry.
I'm so sorry I have to go
You're
through
the beauty
that.
case.
I'm like, yeah, I'm okay.
I'm gonna make it.
That's the thing that really annoys me the most is when people feel sorry for you that you're single, and it's actually, I've got a great life. I'm doing what I want. I'm loving my time. Yes, if the right person came along, I would consider it, but I'm not, and I've only just got to that point where actually I would get there, because I was just like, yes, well, maybe I'm just not good marriage material. Maybe I'm just not good at being married. So I best make the most of being single, because that's where I am. And also, there's not a lot of single guys around. So I've been on a few dates now. There's not a lot of single guys around. My one big date before lockdown, I walked out of because the guy got particularly weird. And I've had a couple of
seems to be a trend for you there.
I know.
You seem to find some of the weirdos.
So I do attract the weirdos, and so you got to laugh at it. And actually, I did phone a friend of mine on my way home eating cake and laughing about it, because I was just like, I was more upset because we'd met at a coffee shop that I couldn't go and get the cake that I'd been eyeing up than the fact that I'd walked out on a date.
Yeah, I like what you said, that you love your life, because even though we're divorced or we're single, never been married, we live a very nourishing and for some successful life, and we enjoy that. But that gets overshadowed of the title, oh, she's divorced. She's, at least in the church culture. But it's up to us to. I like how you're very proactive, that you like to serve. That's where you thrive. But not everyone may be like you, and I think, and that's okay.
And it's taken me a long time to figure out what I need.
Right. But I think what I'm trying to say is that we're awesome people, divorce or not. I mean, we have something to offer. Yeah. And sometimes the feeling of, the self-judgment, the self-doubt, that gets over. I mean, our beautiful, wonderful being us gets overshadowed by that. And it's a real struggle. It is a real struggle. I do struggle with that too.
Well. And there are certain things that I do miss about not being a part of a couple or being married. Snogging for one. Just all those kind of intimate things. Having somebody that knows you and wants to be with you and gets you. All those things I do miss. However, am I going to sit and pine about it? Life's too busy.
Right.
Life's too good an opportunity.
That would be a great question to you. I'm gonna throw this question to the audience as well. Like, what is awesome about you? You, us in general, like being divorced, being single. What is something that you know for sure you can contribute to the society, to the church, and all that stuff? Because when you recognize that, I think it empowers you. There's a lot of, it makes you feel good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I feel like the church has, I hear this a lot, like they've got some sort of plan, they know you're there. And I'm like, okay, I've heard this for years. Like, great, I'm glad you know I'm here. Like, what are we doing about this? And to be fair, my stake president is fantastic, but he's fantastic to the point where I have to bring it to him. And if I do, then he'll support it and he'll help me push. But at some point, I'm sort of like, guys, why do we always have to do like this grassroots groundswell, make it happen on our own? Because the church is just like, oh yeah, that's right, you guys, right? Like, I asked them that. I went to him point blank right before COVID, and I'm like, dude, what is going on with the mid singles? And he said, nothing, literally nothing. He goes, what do you suggest? Like, well, I've got some ideas. And so we started putting together a program, and we took it to him, and he's like, I'll get behind this. But I'm like, why do we have to continually like do this? Like, I feel like it should be something that is already done. And that's why I said, the church has a young men's presidency. They've got a young women's presidency. They got, a General Relief Society presidency. They got a presidency for everything, but not this group that is now, admittedly by them, the largest adult population in the church.
I just think it's a taboo subject. I think it's kind of like sex in general. Like, they're not going to talk about sex because then that, in their mind, they kind of feel like then we're saying it's okay for our youth to have sex, right? So we just don't talk about it. So I kind of feel like if they talk about divorce, if they talk about, even if you've made it to the temple, there's still a big chance it might not work. If they talk about the reality of the subject, that maybe it's kind of like they feel like they're supporting that. And so they just kind of steer clear of it. Like, it's a cultural thing, I think. But I think that's why I've actually got a really good ward now. I really don't know him well because of COVID. We don't really get to meet, but I feel like it's like just this like taboo subject. They're like, we can't really talk about divorce like in Relief Society or have it in as a topic of discussion in one of the handbooks or something, or like, the lesson books, because wouldn't we kind of be supporting divorce versus trying to get everyone married and support families are forever? It's kind of
again, here's where culture changes. I've had a fifth Sunday lesson that we sat down and talked about divorce as a ward.
Really?
Wow.
I've never, ever. And it is, I think it is cultural. Absolutely. I do believe that. Yeah.
And it was one of the things that happened before I left, because actually the bishop at the time recognized that a lot of marriages were struggling, and we had an awful lot of single sisters or sisters that were married to non-members, and there was a little bit of a rub. And so he just sat us all down and was just like, look, this is the ideal, but this is the reality of what it is like in our ward. Right. And how do we serve each other? How do we love each other? How do we make sure we're not forgetting people?
That's great.
That's
awesome. I think that's fantastic. I
couldn't imagine having that in a fifth Sunday in my ward.
No.
They'd be like, why are we talking about this? Like,
well, like, plug your ears, you're gonna jinx us or whatever. Like, for real.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's not because we just have a lot less married, sealed couples within wards here. We will have a lot more women who are married outside of the church. I think we'll have a lot more single women.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I think, because they always teach, from sunbeams on up, go to the temple, get married, seal your family to you, have kids, you're eternal, you're forever, yay, right? It's always like, that's your goal. And so it's hard to shift that, like, you might have got your goal, because a lot of people, they get there, they lose the marriage or whatever, for whatever reason, and it's almost like, wait a minute, you told me if I did X, Y, and Z, I would have this eternal family, and I don't. So then there's that whole bitterness and heartache, and maybe blaming God and all that comes along with it, because I feel like they only focus on that versus yes, that is the optimal. Yes, that's what we're shooting for. But you know what? There's agency, and agency messes things up all the time, right? And so,
I do feel that that's being talked about more now, definitely, than when I got divorced before, that agency does mess things up, and actually we're not all going to have this perfect idealized marriage. And I think definitely growing up through the youth, well, obviously I didn't grow up in the church, but through youth in the church, and this was like the ideal that was really shoved at us. And I didn't come from that background at all either. So I come from a very kind of dysfunctional family unit in many ways. And so actually that was my kind of sense of direction, and actually this is what a family looks like, because I didn't have that in my own background to go back and look at what a normal family unit was. So by the time I was 16, both of my sisters had put themselves into care, and I was caring for my mum, who had mental issues and alcoholism issues. And then I left home completely before I was 17 because I couldn't deal with it. So that was family life for me. And then there was this church idea of family life for me. And it was just like, okay, so I can't do that. I'm rubbish. Where do I fit in?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I struggled with guilt for a really long time.
Me too.
Yeah.
So,
And the guilt of I threw that away.
yeah. Well, I
Because
kept praying.
yeah.
I was like, I am so sorry, my Father, that I have this feeling that I just need to get out. I was done fighting for something that someone else wasn't fighting for. Like I did all the fighting. And it was like, I can't fight for two, right? It doesn't work. And so I felt horrible that I wanted out. But it was almost like the Lord just finally came and was like, it's okay. Like, I want you happy. I want you out. I've kind of told you could get out a long time ago, but you just had to let go of that guilt. You had to be ready emotionally, and it was hard. But as soon as I finally was like, when I understood he wanted me happy, I was his daughter. He didn't want me to live miserable like that. He wanted me to be happy and find happiness. And so then it was like, oh, okay. And I could move forward. But for a really long time, I was definitely stuck in guilt, for sure.
And
Yeah.
I think I projected that onto myself a lot, because thinking about it, so after I got divorced, 3 months later, I'm called as Young Women's President. And I'm sat in the bishop's office going, are you crazy? You want a divorcee, a fresh divorcee?
That is awesome, though.
It's the young women. And
It
he's like,
is.
look, I can't explain why you need to be there.
But you know what? The odds are a majority of them are going to experience divorce. That's the odds. So why not? You
So-
could be an amazing example for them. Or
But I was like, look at all of the women in the ward that you could have picked. And he's like, you've got me. Just, this is what I feel. And so, yeah.
awesome.
And so that kept me in the church for a while.
That's awesome.
And young women are still very special to me.
Yeah.
My girls, bless them, who are now married and have children. And
Wow.
Yeah. So then kind of going back to you stepping away from the church for a while, what ultimately brought you back? What made you decide to start going again?
well, I always knew I believed. I never, like I said, I never had any doubt. I always doubted myself. And after kind of stepping completely away from the church and living a very non-church lifestyle, I knew I wasn't happy doing that. I always had it in me that this isn't actually what I want, but I'm just going to go with it because maybe I'll find it. Always knew that that wasn't it. And I moved about every 2-3 years during this period, and I had to lose a lot of stuff along the way as I moved. But interestingly enough, the one thing that I never got rid of, and I could have very easily discarded, as I never got rid of my scriptures. I never read them, but I never got rid of them. I could never do that parting thing. And I never got rid of my temple clothing. It was always in a bag and always moved with me.
Awesome.
And so that was just that thing that whenever I did a reorganize, throw stuff out, it would always be, no, I'm going to need these. Not yet, but I know I'm going to need these. And then
So it was like on pause, but not gone.
Yeah. And it's just like, I can't do that right now. I just physically, mentally can't do that. I was very broken for a while. I had very bad depression. And at one point actually just went to bed for 3 months. That was my life. I just couldn't even get out of bed for 3 months. And that was just before the breakdown of my marriage and kind of led up to things. But it was just okay. So dealing with that had to come first. And then I could find my spirituality, and I started to pray again, got my scriptures out, started to read. And but I didn't want to go back, because it would have been going back to the ward where my now ex-husband is. And that was the other thing. We were in the same ward for all this time. And he was the darling of the ward, and I was the woman that had been divorced twice. So I did feel that pressure. Nobody ever said that, but I did kind of feel that pressure, and did feel some of the behaviours that kind of came with that, because I never spoke about the reasons why, because that's nobody else's business. So I just let people judge how they saw fit as to what was going on in our marriage that nobody knew about. And then I moved away, moved to a new city that I'd never lived at, went and viewed a property, signed a lease, moved in, and there's a one-way system. So I'd gone in one way, and then I had to go another way to work. And every day I drove past the chapel. And the fact that the chapel was 5 minutes walking distance from where I lived, and I had no idea when I moved in. So every day I just kind of drove past and went, not this week, but but I get it. Not this week, but I get it. And I just knew that I'd been placed there. And then I kind of like took myself to church one Sunday, walked into the doors, and out of his office came the bishop and the Relief Society president, and met me as I walked in the door. Oh, you're new, we haven't seen you before. And before I could turn around and run back out, that was it.
They'd already caught you.
The president and the bishop. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm where I need to be.
I love it. You know what? I just love it that the Lord is always aware of us, no matter what. No matter if we are, where we're supposed to be, or if we're kind of off the path doing our own thing, figuring it out. Like, he is aware, and he is there, and he loves us no matter what. And I love that. I love that you could see his hand in your life. That's awesome.
And continue to see it daily. That's kind of why I'm here where I am. So again, pick a county, off you go, a university, moved, got here, met people that have just got me much more involved in single adults and things. So it wouldn't have happened where I was before.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool.
So as far as the singles program in your stake, do you have any idea how many members there are that are single? How many people are floating around out there, active or even inactive?
I have tried to find out who the stake single adult rep is, and the state clerk I've emailed a number of times, and he doesn't know. And so he's going to look into it. I don't want to push too hard, because the last time I asked who the single adult rep was for the ward, I ended up as it.
You don't want that calling again?
So I don't want another stake calling. Not whilst I'm going through my final year at uni. That would not be, I'm not going to be the best person for that. But these things happen, don't they?
Yeah. It's interesting, because you always hear about the parable that Christ gave of, what shepherd has 100 sheep and won't leave the 99 to go fetch the one. And I often wonder, is that really true when it comes to the singles and the divorced in the ward? Because it certainly doesn't feel like it. I mean, on my end, and maybe this is just my experience and I'm speaking kind of just on my own, but I kind of feel like oftentimes they're like, well, this is more of a, I don't know how to put it properly, but more of a situation that you guys are working through, and you guys just work through that and then let us know when you're ready. That's kind of the feedback I've gotten from we just changed bishops a week ago. So I'm hoping this new bishop will be a little different. But I think about this every time. I was thinking about it today, sitting there in church. And, I'm just like, if I didn't have my kids, because I want them to stay active and know me as active, if I didn't have a calling, I could honestly not be here. No one would know the difference. I don't feel like that lost sheep that anyone would go after. And like I said, maybe that's my experience. But I certainly don't feel like that's where the church goes. It's easy to say those words, but man, I really haven't felt that support.
And I think I've been through that as well. And that's where I just push myself to show up, go do stuff, serve. And my best friends have always been when I've served with them. The people that I've got to know at church because I've served. It's because I was one of the ones that would regularly turn up to clean the chapel when we were allowed in the church. So I would be one of the faces that would turn up to clean the chapel, and became really good friends with the regulars who would turn up, because it would be the same half a dozen people that would do it. And so just making sure I showed up was how I got to know people, and I just had to do it, and just recognize that if I wanted somebody to notice me, I had to go and do that, because ministering companions not always up to it, unfortunately. And I think that's where kind of the program falls down, is us as individuals, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I've always been stuck for whatever reason. Like, I've honestly had like essentially more or less like two callings in church forever. Like, I've either been in the elders quorum presidency like almost entirely throughout, like 10 different times or something like that, or I'm a ward missionary. And I feel like for whatever reason, they're just like, well, here's an easy slot, just go do that. And I'm like, I don't know. I feel like instead of like, maybe this is me complaining too much. So I'm sort of venting here a little bit.
I think I always put it down to, I've not recently been in an award for more than 2-3 years. And so I always put it down to, it takes a year for people to kind of get to know your face. And then it takes another year to kind of start to have friends. And as soon as I get to that point, I've moved. However, I do wonder if it's like, actually, is it harder to make friends as a single in the church? Is it harder to socialize with other people in the church? I remember when I was married, all of a sudden we would have invites to go, go and do stuff. And then I was just a bit overwhelmed by the fact that people wanted to meet up outside of church, because that's not something that's done over here. Because we all live a great distance apart from each other. It's not like we're all on the same block, like in Utah. And
I
so
kind of feel,
I won't see a member for all week. You'll see a member on a Sunday, and that's it.
yeah, I kind of feel for the guys that are single, because like for us women, if we're, well, I'm blessed I don't have to work outside the home right now. So I get to be able to like still go do lunches and stuff with the ladies that are married, because they have, their kids are in school. So they have free time during the, afternoon, maybe to grab and go lunch and hang out and talk. But guys are usually, working. And then if there's somebody in the ward that they're kind of connect with, like friends wise, but then once they get off work, then that person is home with the kids and the wife and dealing with that. And so I feel like the guys don't have that option.
And I didn't have that option as a teacher. I'd be in work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I'd leave work at 7 o'clock in the evening and take Marking home with me.
Yeah.
So it would be like Saturday would be the day where actually I was organizing life. Sunday was church.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I definitely feel that, especially around the holidays. I remember even this last Christmas, everybody kind of posted this thing of the ward of all these couples together, and they were like doing their Christmas sweaters and everything, like, hey, this is great. And I'm like, I didn't even hear anything about it. I had no idea what's going on. And even today, like, I was with my kids, and there's a park real close, and it's, kind of right there where a lot of the ward ends up coming out. And so I'm there at the park with the kids today, and another guy is kind of there for my ward, and I start talking to him a little bit. He happens to be my ministering brother. I'm like, hey, this is your one time this year you get to like actually minister to me, because that's about where we're at with this. But yeah, I mean, he's talking about how the new bishop stopped by his place and everything else. And I'm like, I just feel like I get slotted, like, hey, this is what you do, go do it. And then like nobody else in the ward will even know you exist. Just go keep doing what you've been doing forever. Like that sucks. Like I'm a person. I would love to, I don't know, just be a part of things. And I don't feel like that as somebody who's single. And to be fair, I did get divorced in this ward. And so there was a lot of craziness that sort of went on there. That's a whole long story with my ex and how like she went off with some other guy and posted it. And my whole ward's like, what is going on? So in some ways, maybe they think like, dude's toxic, right? Like she ran off with another dude, posted on Facebook. We got to see the whole thing. And I'm like, awesome. Now everybody thinks I'm like this pariah or something in the world.
Or maybe it's they didn't know what to do at the time and now they're embarrassed because they didn't know how to reach out to you.
Yeah. 3 years later, that's great. So
Timing.
yeah. It's just sort of it's kind of like this weird thing. And like I said, I'm venting, so I apologize for that in advance. But I have felt this way for a long time that the church just needs to, like, they talk about stepping up, but I'm like, where is it? Like, okay, enough talk, do it. Does that make sense? Like, I see them like, hey, we'll support you if you go do it. Like, fantastic, guys. Like, I don't want to be the one that goes and does it. And then you guys say, okay, see, it's being done. Like, I want you guys to do it. I want someone to like be serious about it, put a budget behind it, like act like it's really a priority, that you really want these people back. Like when I went to my stake president, I remember he came to me and he's like, okay, if you can like get a bunch of people behind this, we'll support a mid-singles program. I'm like, dude, you get the high council room, I'll pack it. It doesn't matter. I'll get people there. But as I told everybody else that was going to the meeting, we can't just go there and say, we want more dances. You have to go there with the guys of, we're here because there is no program and you are literally losing people to no program and nothing for them in the church. Is that what you want? Because if we build something, people will at least feel like they have something to go to. And that's the only thing that sticks with those guys.
Although I've obviously taken over it as single adult rep, and I've tried to contact everybody on this list, and I don't know people, so it's not that there any like history with anybody, so they don't want to talk to me or think I might judge them. And I've tried to, and I've only had 2 people out of 80 contact me back.
Oh, wow.
People are not interested, and they both said thanks, but not really interested in single adult things.
Okay, but let me throw on a quick but here on this. So
yes, please do.
Years ago, we had this problem. This was my early 30s, right? Like other situations. So these girls came to the stake president and they're like, sort of like what you experienced. We go to these dances after we leave the young single adult ward. It's 30 till death, right? Like that's the age range you get. And there's not like some sort of like slotted mid singles or whatever. At least there wasn't at the time. And so you get these guys that are 60s, 70s coming up asking girls in their 30s if they want to dance. It's creepy. I don't know why guys do it. So guys, if you're out there, don't be creepy. Don't do it. Stupid. It's a bad move. It doesn't make any sense. But we started off because they came to me and said, look, we have a problem here. We need you to help kind of build a program around this. Let's put together like some sort of mid-singles program. We've got all the stake presidents I'm in Portland. So in the Portland area that are on board with this. I'm like, all right, cool. But this is what we need to do. We have to have consistency. We have to have FHE every Monday. We have to have these things. And I even got pushback from other people that were like other reps. And they were like, oh, that's a little much. We don't want to do it. We had 4 people show up at the first one within a few months, because same thing you were saying. People were like, we don't want this, right? Like, we're not interested, yada, yada. Thanks. We've heard this before. Smoke and mirrors, blah, blah, blah. And some of them were just like, we're not interested in the church. Within 6 months, we had, I kid you not, like at least 200 people showing up to those things. We had like volleyball nets. We had people like lined up waiting for their turn. People come, but they've been burned. And I feel like a lot of them aren't interested anymore.
A year later, I still don't have anybody coming out.
Really? Oh my
But what do
God.
you have going on?
So we have lots of Zoom things going on because obviously nobody can actually physically meet anywhere.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to come to anything. And the people that I've spoken to are just not interested in the church is a big one. Just and not interested in getting together with single adults. Some of them have like family that they'd rather be involved with or whatever. And I'm like, so after the pandemic's over, we'll start to do some things. Well, not really my scene. And I think single adults just has a bad rep.
Well, I can tell you, I pulled a few tricks that I think are much more difficult in your situation because there is one thing that's like, it's almost like a light for bugs, right? The little zapper thing. If you have like food, members come. That's just how it is. So you can't really do that via Zoom, right?
But we used to also have like a Friday evening, before the pandemic, we had a Friday evening games night, entertainment night going on with food every Friday. Mm-hmm. How many members out of a ward of about 120 would you expect to attend that? Out
of one ward?
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say maybe a couple, a handful at most. That's what I would guess.
The whole ward is invited, so that there's like 120 adults and then all their associated families. We get 2 or 3.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Those are like married members and everything else?
Everybody. Okay. Anybody could come. And it was just like a socialization, but people are involved in their families. They're involved with other things.
The married people don't really need that social outlet, right? They're at home juggling kids and trying to just doing the life at home.
And even like the singles, if they've got kids, are too busy trying to
find a babysitter
or working.
Or working.
Well, I can tell you, the program that we put together, when I left, there were some other people that kind of took it over and they wanted to do game nights all the time, where it's like, hey guys, show up and we're going to do like board games and have brownies. Nobody cared. So
Everett, I am going to pick your brain later as to exactly how to attract people.
You can pick it, just don't pick it too much because it's pretty small and like not very deep. So it'll end quickly.
Well, I think based from the general conference, it's the recognition in the church that I think is the first step. Because number one, I think we agree, we can all agree that they don't know what to do with us, all of us. Right. There's so many of us. But I think if, just like what you mentioned, Everett, like if we are able to voice, able to communicate and just put it out there and see what happens, but don't diminish that light that you have, that fire that you want, the change, just because a no was mentioned one time. I now look at no's as a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful no. Because every time rejection is just redirection. So maybe not now, maybe the following Sunday might be a yes, or maybe the following month might be a yes. But I think we're a big church, there's a lot to figure out, and the voices from each of us will definitely be an aid to create either a program or a more concrete. I don't like the fact that if you reach a certain age, then you get thrown to a family ward. I don't like that. I just feel like, where's the equal opportunity here for all of us?
We only have
doesn't mean we don't want to be married.
We only have family wards, so it makes no difference to us.
And then that's the difference in every country. And I think
there's one single adult ward in the whole country.
Oh wow.
Wow.
What about young single adults? Do you guys have a YSA ward?
No, there's one young single adult ward in the whole country.
Young single adult.
That's it. Okay. There's no single adult wards.
Gotcha.
You would empty the family wards out if you just took all the single adults out.
I was gonna say, like, I've already capped out of the mid-singles adults too. So like they don't, once you're above 45, like they don't really have anything for you. They're just like, oh, sorry.
Now it's 46 till death.
Fear on
46.
us,
Yeah.
like the age drives the fear that everyone is like, well, you can't really, stop aging, but that also drives the fear of like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be 35 or 45, then I'm gonna be more of a cast out,
Yeah.
when really it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be perceived that way. So
Yeah.
And as a woman that's closer to 50 than closer to 30, I don't want to go to mid-singles activities because I'm not attracted to the younger men. So again, where do you put the
Yeah.
boundary?
Yeah.
and that's a
But
good
if you go to
conversation
the older
to
groups,
have.
then it's like old guys, like too old of guys, right? It's
Who knows? My last stake that I was in, the only single adult activity they had was at the temple. So they had a temple week, and that was wonderful. Only it was during term time. So if you couldn't get that week off, and it was Monday to Friday, they didn't even have like the Saturday. So it was, sorry, Tuesday to Friday. They didn't even have the Saturday. So when I brought this up at the stake level and said, what about us guys that kind of like working and can't just take time or take time off? Well, physically can't. In my job, it doesn't work. And it would be the whole, well, never mind. It's for us older lot anyway. Thank you.
wow.
I sort of feel like a lot of these events, when they're put together, it's sort of like a first impression, right? So people show up to an event, and too often they walk in, especially a dance. I know Celeste has never been to a dance, but the dances can be a whole nother reason to leave the church entirely. But I'm kidding. Okay, maybe they're not quite that bad.
Joe likes him. He's a fan. He's in the
Well,
audience.
Joe's probably out there like totally cutting a rug, right? He's like got some serious like breakdancing moves or something from.
I know.
But I feel like, for example, let's say I'm single and I've been away from the church for a while, and I'm like, okay, I've heard there's some things happening. I'm going to go dip my toe in the water again. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to see like how this goes. I walk into a dance or an activity and it's completely lame. It's lacking. It's boring. It's just like, there is nothing for me. You guys totally fooled me. It's like that impression will knock them back into inactivity like that for another 5 years, 10 years, until they might try again. So I feel like there needs to be a bit of an energy, but more importantly, there needs to be the spirit. Like that was the biggest thing for ours that I told people, like, we have to have the spirit there. There has to be a spiritual lesson. I don't care if I'm teaching the lesson and there's 4 people because nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it. But if that's what it takes, when people show up and they feel like, okay, you know what? There wasn't a lot of people there, but I felt good. It's like that first impression, like, all right, maybe I'll give it another shot, So when it comes to these sort of activities and reinvigorating people, the church has an opportunity to say, hey, there's all these ones out there of the 99 that we're just kind of like, eh. And I would say at this point, clearly it's more than, the one out of the 99. We're like 51 and they're the 49, right? We're the majority now. So
we got the power.
Yeah, give us something to like work with here from a higher up level that is like cohesive to help bring these people. Give them something to feel like, if I go back, I'm not going to get burned. If I go back, it's going to be good. I mean, I don't even care if they have to just pull out stuff from the bishop's storehouse and give us food, like feed these people, whatever it takes. Do you want them back? You know what I mean? Like,
But I think there's
No, go ahead.
also like two sides of the stories, of two sides of two kinds of mindset. The people that are coming back and like, awesome, I'm here in the dance, I'm showing up, I'll do my best, whether I meet somebody or not, I'll be here because I chose to be here and I chose to contribute. I'll grace them with my presence. And then there's another mindset where it's like, okay, I'm here. I suck. Nobody will ask me to dance. Nobody will introduce them. So you get to pick and choose. You know when you how to show up in any events. That's what I realized. Other than declaring my own church holiday, I realized that at the end of the day, I could not deny the fact that I was born in the church, that I'm a Mormon. I could not be converted to another religion if that was, because I've thought about that. But I'm like, I couldn't erase the fact that I am LDS. I am LDS. That's who I am. And so I have to navigate through like also like a shift in mindset where, okay, I can go to church, I can choose to go to church, or I can choose to extend my church holiday. You know, one or one of those things will still serve its purpose and then will lead you to what's your next step. Do you still want to be part of the church collectively, or you just want to be part of, you know, like a watcher, an observer?
And I do think we're problematic as a group because there is such diversity. There's diversity of age, there's diversity of where you live, there's a diversity of your experiences. Have you always been single? Have you been divorced? What are your expectations? Do you want to just socialize with people because you need to make friends and you need to connect with members because there aren't any members around you? Or is it you are actually looking for the one? And anything in between. So we are a difficult group, and I think there needs to be lots of different things going on for all the different specters that there are on within that. And I think we've got to know what we want and go out and make it happen.
Right.
I'm very inspired by the lady that does the Boise Bash. I want to
Tara,
find a way to do something like that over here because I think that would go down a storm.
Yeah.
So maybe I will end up as stake single adult rep because
sounds like you'd be good at it.
Yeah, this would be a great subject to have Tara on tonight to discuss.
I know.
I think she has a lot of good stuff to add to this. Yeah. But and going back to Christina's point, I think it's great, if people would show up and just have that mindset of like, all right, I'm going to do this even if it stinks, because truly, right? Like you can go to an activity and maybe 9 times out of 10, it's just lame. And then that 10th time, that person that just you click with is there and everything kind of like works, right? But if you show up once, you're there for 10 minutes, you're like, okay, this is lame, I'm out, peace. Then you're never going to find that. But I think all too often people maybe they just left the YSA ward or whatever, and they've been single for couple years, or they went through a bad divorce and they feel embarrassed at their church, like they feel like they gave up on their marriage or something, or they feel like people are looking at them that way. I think all too often, yes, they want that, but they need to have something to help stick them like glue a little bit, like a little something to grab onto.
And it needs to not feel like a meat market.
Yeah.
Right.
It needs to be somewhere that we can just go and friendship and be with others who are in our situation, that can be empathetic towards us, understand us, and have a love for the gospel, and will understand where we're coming from. And I can talk about Christ. I can talk about having a morally clean life and not be looked at like I've got two heads.
Yeah. That's why I would always say you have to have that spirit there. If the spirit's not there, then, I mean, you can show up, it can be a meat market or whatever, but it's just not going to stick. Even if it's a lame activity, but people feel that warmth inside, that's the beautiful thing about the spirit, is it attracts people. It doesn't push people into it, right? So if you've got that activity and you're attracting that and people feel that attraction when they go there, there's something there that they want to have again. And that's where hopefully too, it's well planned out. The activities are fun. People aren't sitting around like, let's play board games, eat brownies, and like be really bored. Like give a variety of things to do, right? Like Okay, maybe
But still have the board games because some of us quite like that.
Some of us would be over there having board games. Me and you,
some
Kim.
would. Some
And,
would.
and eating brownies and the conversations that go on with board games are the things
And the
that make-
brownies, like just bring it all. That works.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I want to recognize what Kim shared earlier, that we're a group, we're an awesome group, but we're also can be a very challenging group because of age differences, cultural and diversity and whatnot. I think the beauty in that is that we can have, or we can ask ourselves when we go to either the class or an event, is what is your focus? Why is this important to you, and what is some sort of goal as to why you're doing it? And once you recognize that, then going to a dance or a game night isn't going to be as bad, because you know why you're showing up for a certain activity or a certain event. And then again, that leads to like the power of like, I can show up for myself instead of like, I want to show up because I don't want to be attached to an outcome. That's kind of like my mantra, like in life right now, that I live in the now, and I don't want to attach especially in dating, because I think women, all of us, has the tendency to overthink, and then when we start getting to know people, we're like, eternal marriage coming up, when really the beauty is getting, the little step by step that you have to share with that person, getting to know that person. And that comes with, I don't know, like showing up for an activity too, as simple as that. And it's easier said than done, but there's beauty and power to when you're just, showing up for yourself because it's important to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's great if you can get people there. I feel like there are some people who will do that regardless, but then there's a lot of people who are just not at that level. Right. And we're trying to bring them out. And when we're trying to bring them out, that's where their testimony might not be to the point where they're like, okay, I know this is true. I need to just suck it up and do it, kind of thing.
Right. And that's why it's easier said than done, because it's always a process. We're all in different stages in our lives. But the awareness that brings out, with that thought, you just start with the spark, and then let the fire burn and see how bright you can be as a human being, as a member of the church, because we all have potential. That's,
Absolutely.
And it's creating that critical mass, isn't it? Where you have enough people and enough diversity of people that actually everybody can feel included, and it doesn't feel like a little clique, or right. You're not part of the in crowd, or you're not part of the gang that does right. This normally. Yeah. And get that inclusivity. Because as a single adult that wouldn't necessarily, I'm okay I'll go to the opening of an envelope, I'll go anywhere on my own, go do anything. I last summer, when we did have a little bit of lifting of the lockdown, I actually traveled all the way around the country and went and visited various people from the Facebook and Zoom meetings that I'd met.
Awesome.
Because that's the kind of person I am. But there are so many people that just wouldn't do that. And that isn't in their personality and isn't in their character. And so we've got that wide spectrum again of people that we've got to kind of welcome in and bring into what we want to do. And with me, it's much more of a friendshipping thing, and knowing that I'm not alone. I'm not the only weirdo in this country that's single, divorced, and prepared to still and goes to church every Sunday that she can, because that's where I need to be spiritually.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, we're kind of in a spot right now where I feel like, there have been a lot of comments, and what we should do is definitely open this up to the audience to ask some questions as well at this point, because I feel like this is a conversation. A lot of people have things either to add or they would like to discuss. So if you've got something that you would like to talk about at this point, please raise your hand. I think it's Alt-Y on a Windows computer. I think it's the
Where
little
is
hand.
Corey when you need him to come?
Right. Corey's got
He
like
has
all
to
the
work. I mean, like he acts like he's got an important
Or if
job
he
or something. I don't know.
Click on the participants at the bottom of the participants pane is raise hand.
Right. So there's like Alt Y and then like Command Y
Y.
or something too. I don't remember.
right.
Oh wait, we've got some hands. Okay,
There
Clark.
I think Clark was
Clark, you
first and then
first.
Lori's next.
Hey
There
Clark.
we got
We can't hear you, I don't think.
There, now you can
You
see
are.
me.
Yep.
I've got a long list of comments here. I actually stopped and took notes tonight.
Oh, very cool.
First off,
curious.
on doing the single adult list cleanup here, there, having been both the ward clerk and also the single adult rep at various points, the first thing you need to do if you're doing single adult lists, either at the ward or stake level, is go talk to the Relief Society presidents. They'll wipe 2/3 of that list out of existence. There. Church
did they do
records are
that?
not up to date. I wish
Oh.
they were, but they're not.
Okay.
There on it. Now, as far as it's not a group there, we are so diverse that we are not going to be ever really a group there. We're just simply too diverse a group there. And part of this, we need to encourage flexibility in what we call the group. We need to learn to get out and do the things we're doing there on it. And that's one of those things that I don't know what we do with it. The mid-singles program was created because there were so many creepy guys. But at the same time, I was doing soda pop dances in Billings that literally I was dancing with everything from 3-year-olds to 100-year-olds. In a non-church setting, I was doing community dances where I was dancing with every age group there. Now, suddenly we can't dance except in a narrow age group. There's just something missing there.
Well, I sort of feel like, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I feel like there's some ways that the church has already categorized. I mean, yeah, we've got a diverse group and everything, but when you're able to set up a young single adult, like a young single adult ward, and you break it down by age brackets, why is there no reason that they can't do the same thing for other age brackets, mid singles, and I don't know what you would want to call it, maybe like season singles or something.
Mature singles.
Mature singles.
super awesome, super sexy, hot.
Or
awesome.
just the old ladies and
The
old
turning grays. I don't know, something, but
Ladies
Well,
of a certain
I
age.
watched the creation of the mid-singles program in Denver there. It was the third officially supported mid-singles program there. And in essence, what they did was they created a mid-singles program, and in the process, they killed the single adult program.
why do you think it killed the single adult program?
Well, because they robbed resources there was part of it. Part of it was they left a whole group feeling excluded.
Well, there's going to be some of that at the beginning. I can speak from
Mhm.
experience on this a little bit, because when we set up the mid-singles program here a while ago, that was one of the big pushbacks. The single adults were like, this isn't fair. Why do you have your own dances? Why should you have your own FHEs and basically potlucks? Everything that we were doing was separate, and they felt like kind of, left out. But the problem is that we're excluding them because there needs to be an exclusion. I mean, if you wanted to spread that same sort of logic, you could say, well, why would somebody who's 35 or 40 be kicked out of a young single adult ward? In this case, they felt like they should be in that bracket. Well, I feel young still. Well, you know what? You're not. I can't self-identify as a 25-year-old. I'd like to. My body won't handle it. I mean, it reminds me in the morning sometimes, like, dude, you're not 25 anymore. So,
I think it would just be amazing if we had the numbers to support that. If you stripped the single adults out of most family wards here would really suffer. My last ward, I don't know how many single adults there are in my current ward because I don't know them well enough, but my last ward we had 3 young single adults. And so this is why in our areas there just aren't enough people to sustain those different types of wards and programs.
Yeah.
And this is why we have to travel for hours to get anywhere, because just to meet with a few single adults.
Well, I'm going to comment that the best conferences I've been to have been combined young single adult and single adult as a single event there.
well, I can tell you that there are a lot of people that we ran into that stopped coming because they were combined. And so for everybody that likes them, there are an equal amount that don't.
Yeah, a lot of the
Yeah.
younger ladies don't like the old guys hitting on them.
Yeah.
Well, this is completely true, and I'm fully aware of this. What I was talking about was the Montana conferences, where literally, if we're going to have enough people to have an event, you had to have everybody.
Yeah, and I think that gives a different, if you need more people, then obviously you fill it in with who you can, but.
There, and this is one of those things that adds into the process there, and I don't know, it's one of the things. Then Everett was commenting about top-down leadership for single adults there. You really think that's going to happen? Priesthood fails right straight through on just about everything there. This is why I end up doing so many things from the bottom up anyway. So,
Well, at the same time, if the church is behind it, I feel like it has a better chance of succeeding and continuing forward than a few people, because just for full transparency for our program, we built a phenomenal program. It was going great. Like I said, we had hundreds of people showing up. We had like potlucks, guest speakers all the time. I mean, it was rocking and rolling. And those were just FHEs. I mean, imagine having 150, 200 people at an FHE. It was great. And this was all mid singles. The situation is that they're there on the roster. And I think if you go through the roles, you would be surprised how many people are actually there, but they're not active. They're not coming out. They don't feel like there's anything for them, or they're just like are bitter, or whatever the case might be. But after some of the people who are kind of putting it together, the grassroots, the groundswell, they ended up getting married, and we kind of like shuffled off. And then the church wasn't really supporting it. And you got new people coming in who wanted to just do board games because it was easier than setting up volleyball nets and having board games. And they just wanted to do brownies. And by the time they were done, like just being lazy with their way they wanted to run things, they're back down to like, 10 people showing up again, maybe sometimes 5. And it was sad because
And
they know they're out.
I think that's just a great example of we kind of reap what we sow. As much effort, as much as we want a program, we've got to put the effort in because it is up to us, isn't it? And we can't rely on that. And it's the same 10 people that do everything in the church, and the same 10 people that are already overwhelmed by lots of things at work, home, church. And so people have just got to step up.
Yeah. That's why I think if the church is there kind of on it from top down saying, these are the things that need to happen, we need to continue these programs.
But I think the problem with the program is people then get to ticking boxes rather than actually doing it and putting their heart and soul into it and putting in that extra effort, because they would have been ticking the boxes just doing the board games and making the brownies.
That could happen for anything,
Well,
that could happen in Relief Society too.
Thanks, Clark, for coming on and with your comments and questions. We appreciate it. Okay, Lori, you are up next.
Lori was next, and then Laura.
And then
Lori and Laura.
I don't know why I'm always so nervous to to share
Oh,
questions.
you're great.
Anyway, thank you for sharing your story, Kim, and some of what you've gone through. To kind of go back to the theme, because that's partially why I joined tonight, struggling with some of that myself, of where divorce kind of pushes you away in a very family-oriented church and setting. But basically, like for myself, having gone through really struggling with feeling at a lot of times supported or seen in my ward. I know there's a lot of times where I wasn't really open to hearing what people wanted to share with me, because I was very resentful and bitter over a ward where I was divorced in the same ward that my husband became inactive in. And all of a sudden, everything just stopped. Like, I was supported, I was seen as a wife of someone that they wanted to try to reactivate. But the minute that I got divorced in a very public, very nasty divorce, it was like all of a sudden people just didn't want to really have anything to do with me. Anyway, basically my question for you, Kim, is that, you know, like, and maybe you already answered this because I've been trying to keep up with listening and message the chat and stuff like that. But what would you say is the biggest hurdle that you overcame? It's kind of a two-part question. What would you say is the biggest hurdle that you overcame by trying to come back to church with some of that in your life? And also, what would you suggest is the best way to be able to connect and to be able to share and speak with those people who struggle with hearing, you know, this is somewhere positive for you to be, when they don't want to hear that, if that makes sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And I totally agree with you. I heard so many things through my filter of guilt and through my filter of just depression and my filter of having very low self-esteem, that I would take messages from conferences as beating me up. I would take messages from the pulpit as, oh, I can't achieve that, and then pile more on me. And a lot of therapy went into a lot of it, getting some good medication to deal with my depression, and realizing that actually depression was going to be a long-term issue and not just something, because obviously also back then depression wasn't spoken about in the church, and it's only very recently that it's something that I've felt comfortable to speak out about myself. And I've actually suffered from depression since my childhood, but not dealt with it effectively until quite recently, and still struggle with it. So, and understand, when you get to a point where you can understand that those things will just make everything sound different and feel different, you just have to find something to hold on to. And whatever it is that sparks that for you. And for me, it was keeping hold of my scriptures and keeping hold of my temple clothes. There was always that little bit of, I can't do it now, but I know I will. And that was what kept it for me. And I didn't read my scriptures for years. I didn't pray for years. I didn't do anything for years because I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel right. I didn't feel like I would be able to progress. And then after I got my head sorted and myself sorted and my life was going pretty well, I realized that wasn't a life that I wanted, and actually I wanted back in. But I had to really go about it by starting by reading my scriptures, starting by praying, and then I had the strength to go back in and face what I knew was going to be possibly a disciplinary council. And that was my biggest worry, was in my own head and how I judged myself. And it wasn't until I had an amazing bishop and an amazing stake president that really put me straight on exactly the amount of work I'd done myself, and that I should have been back at church for the support with that sooner. And I would have been supported, and understanding the atonement properly, and just spending a long time really thinking about the atonement, studying about the atonement, and some of the materials that are out there now are much better for that than some of the materials we had previously, some of the books that we had previously that just kind of dug the knife in a little bit more with some of the books that we'd be told to go away and learn about the atonement. I think book by Tad Callister played a big difference in changing my opinion of how the atonement applied to me, and not just on a sin basis, but in a being able to cope with my life basis, being able to cope with going back to church.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I know that when you said the whole part of that, you know, that wasn't really talked about. I started my divorce 14 years ago, and it was a 2-year-long divorce. And so, yeah, it felt like there was just a lot that just wasn't really available that's starting to be more available now. And I actually had an opportunity to speak a little bit with Celeste, I think a couple weeks ago or something. And yeah, for me, it was definitely, I really struggled because mine was a trust in God was completely shattered. And that was really hard to hear messages from people that had no idea what I was going through. And I actually had to step away from church to be open again to rehearing gospel principles and gospel doctrine that I've been taught my whole life that I just became very shut out to. And so sometimes I know that those messages, it's just our own, like you said, getting out of your own head, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to shake things up. We have to make it different. And so now I'm trying to figure out ways of how I can relate to other people that are struggling through that same thing.
And by nature, I'm a feisty, rebellious soul. And if you tell me don't do something,
yeah,
It's the red hair. It's the red hair.
exactly.
Watch me do
Yeah,
this.
I constantly get told, but you know, yeah, my red hair is partially my, you know, that stubborn streak that I have. So
and it won't be in a loud way necessarily. It will just be that really.
Yeah.
I'll show you.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much for sharing.
Thanks for coming on, Lori. Appreciate it.
Laura.
Okay, Laura, you're next.
Hey guys, so I'm in my jammies, so I'm gonna keep my camera off.
That's okay.
okay.
No problem.
I don't know if I don't know if you guys already talked about this because I came in later. A friend invited me, so I missed a lot. But I wanted you to know that the church, the prophet, he's noticed that singles' needs are not being met. In fact, singles are the largest demographic in the church, and we are also the largest group that's leaving the church. And obviously that's because our needs are not being met. So the church has been working on a pilot program for singles, and they're testing it out with the North America West area, which is like California, Canada, Hawaii. I don't remember where else, but they're trying it out. And
They skip Portland. They don't like our area. They're like,
sorry,
those guys are crazy over there.
No, they like you. They're saving the best for last.
Oh,
But
Oh, there you go.
we're basically it's all the singles, young singles, mid singles, older singles. They call them YS1 and YS2 for the two older single groups. And some things we do all together, because some things, you know, it's appropriate to do things together because we can learn from singles of all ages with experience and different talents and things like that. Things like service projects or firesides, or, you know, just things getting together. And then other things we kind of break off into our other groups, like dances or different activities, because let's face it, we don't always have all the same interests. You know, like an 18-year-old's not necessarily going to have the same interests as a 65-year-old. So, and when I joined singles, I was, I don't know, 32. I'm 35 now. But this is my second round going back into singles.
Oh,
So that's okay. But I went with my mid-single friends to the singles activities, and I don't mean to be rude, but it was like going to a retirement home, and everybody there was like 80, 90s in wheelchairs, walkers, and they would play bingo and they would have food, and that was fine, except that's what we did every single time, and that's not fun for us. And so I just wanted to put that out there, because we do need to come together as a big single group, because it's good to have like that community, and it doesn't have to be about dating, but we also need our own individual groups for our own interests, if we want to go hiking or we want to play bingo or whatever, you know. But the church is aware of our needs, and once we figure out all the kinks and we work through this and we get through the conference in August, it's not the end, it's only the beginning. And they're going to start taking this program worldwide to all the singles to try to build a stronger community. And the focus is not dating and marriage. The focus is living an abundant life, being happy and growing exactly where you are without any expectations of marriage and all that. And focusing more on like doing service together, not going to dances and dating, but doing service together. And because you're not going to be happier than when you're doing service, right? And some people will fall in love and get married, but some of us are, we won't. And so why not have that community and that support to back us?
I think that's amazing. I'm excited. I know I've been like following you on the chat there. You've been explaining it to on there, and I'm just like, that's so awesome. I'm glad that they're doing that. And I do think it's good that it's not like solely focused on marriage, because I think, like I said in the chat, like if you're having everyone, participate in service and things like that gives you, organic situations where you can meet people and that can lead to marriage, but you don't have to necessarily just be counsel about marriage the whole time. So yeah, that's awesome, Laura.
Yeah, and please don't give us a married couple in charge.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, actually, speaking of that, the singles are in charge, but we were given permission to ask married people to run it so that, because when you run a singles thing, there's always the singles that don't get to do anything because they're taking the tickets and they're letting people in and they're running everything. Well, we plan everything and then the married people run it so we could enjoy it too.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That makes
sense.
Well, thank you, Laura. That is so awesome. We're excited to hear about that. And hopefully
refreshing. Yeah, to know.
Wide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's great that the church is coming out and saying like, hey, okay, we need to get some things going, even if they're just pilot programs. And thankfully they are branching out and not just doing pilot programs in Utah, because I feel like Utah kind of gets everything and then they're like, well, maybe that didn't really work so well. So we never hear about it out here in outer darkness or the mission field or whatever Utah wants to call us, right?
Not in
Outer darkness.
I've heard that one before. I think usually they just call it the mission field, but yeah, I would be excited to have something that would stick. I think you're spot on when you say people show up and there's activities going on. It's bingo night. The refreshments are pudding because it's easily pureed and, people can swallow it because they're old and that kind of thing. You're like, all right, guys, this just isn't for me. This is not me. So that's where, if you're trying to attract people back into the program, it has to be something that is for everybody, that you go there and it's not just something that's tragic. You're like, wow, I don't connect on any level. I mean, part of the reason people go inactive is because they feel like there's nothing there for them anyways. So if they go and show up to an activity and there's still nothing there for them, what are you really doing to get them back? You've shown them nothing different.
And if you do what you've always done, you'll get what you've always got.
Amen. Kim, that is so wise. Look at you being all witness.
The Tao of Kim.
I know, it was awesome.
I'm stuck with the program geared towards, living a life of abundance, because that's very
That's
broad.
awesome.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
everyone can then define their own abundance.
Everyone fits under that umbrella, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's great.
Well, I feel like, as usual, this is kind of one of those topics we could go on and on and on all night. But we always have to kind of cap it a little bit. We've kind of run over a little bit tonight. But Kim, I really appreciate you being on here.
Yeah.
It's been great getting to know you. I can't imagine, what time is it there? Like 5:15 in the morning?
Yes, it is.
Oh.
So
Oh,
Go take another, what did you call it, disco nap or something?
go now.
it's now time to get up. So I'm fine.
Oh,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that makes me tired just thinking about it.
you're always tired, Everett, though.
I
That's
am
just
kind of always tired.
But insomnia is a gift.
Yeah.
And that's how I got involved the first time that I came on One Live, because usually I catch up with you guys. And I'm like, hey, they're fun.
I know. I remember you popping in, or you're like, I'm in the UK and I can't sleep, so here I am, and I'm like, oh,
I've been here for a while.
cool.
Hopefully you've been able to get over to the YouTube channel and check out some of the other ones that you had missed. So
Yeah, I've just got two to catch up on. I'm all up to date.
Oh, good job.
well,
Because
I
I
hate to
was
break it to you,
intentionally
but I got several to upload. So
Okay.
I'm gonna blast you with about 4 more here. I've just been like kind of dealing with some other stuff. So I'm
Yeah.
a bit behind getting them posted up there, but they will be
Yeah,
this week for
Don't forget about us poor people that have time zones. and
I
can't
know,
get out,
right?
so-
yes, yes.
Well, we appreciate you coming on, especially from clear over there in the UK. And
Yeah.
again, you like now have the title of the very first like out of country guest that we've had on the show. So
You're now an international podcast.
that's right. We're
Yeah.
international.
And such a great night to or day
Yeah.
create such
Morning.
awareness. Different countries, different cultures. That's what I like about this podcast and church in general. That we're so diverse.
We are, but you can walk into any chapel and you'll know where everything is. You can
Yes.
walk into any sacrament meeting and you feel at place. And that's the great thing about the church.
Yep, absolutely. I agree.
Well, Kim, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate it. And this is the part of the show where we kind of stop the recording. We ask everyone if you'd like to turn on your cameras and your microphone. If you can't, or if you don't want to, if you just prefer to listen in, you're perfectly welcome to do that as well. Obviously, some people are in their jammies. That's totally okay.
That's